context of the Bible. And let's see if I can blow this verse again this week. Don't do it for the laughs, but I need some accountability, and it just happens that you guys are the ones that keep me accountable. And that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The day is far spent, and that's what I stopped. The night is at hand, the day is far spent. And then I don't know that next section, verse 13, let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying. And I'm going to learn the 14th verse this week and the rest of the 12th verse. Whew, I made it. All right. But I'm putting some humor in there, kind of. But I challenge you, let's do this together, okay? Let's work at it. Let's try it. Let's try to not let it just be something that we mumble through each Sunday morning and then forget about till the next Sunday morning. And I can't challenge you to do that unless I try myself. So, context of the Bible. We began trying to just talk about when we read the Bible, when we study the Bible, what it is that we should be looking or seeing or looking for beside just the words that are there. All of us know, as soon as I say it, that the Bible wasn't written yesterday. It wasn't written in 1980. So, and things have changed in the world around us since the time the Bible was written. So when we read the Bible, we can't take and understand it only in our current context. It was written for us. I can't remember where it was, and maybe you'll notice it now as you read along. There's all kinds of times in the Bible where there's a semicolon and then a closed parenthesis, and I know that the Bible's not winking at me. Okay, you guys that are into texting and all that, right? I mean, that's not the language of the Bible. So we can't take, that's obvious, but even words that we understand in today's context, in today's life, they might not exactly mean that. And the message of the Bible is clear enough, just reading it, but we get a much clearer idea, a much better understanding when we take the time to look into it, to study it, and to try to understand its contexts. And I want to point out 6 different contexts, 6 different sets of glasses, lenses that we might look through when we're looking at the Scriptures beside just reading the words. We mentioned 2 of them last week. The first was the historical context. What time in the Bible, what time in history was this writing? Did this writing take place? And what time in the biblical history did it take place, but even in non-biblical history? When the Bible was written, the people it was written to, they lived in the world, and things were happening in the world around them, and they didn't have our technologies, but they did know what was going on in the world around them. And so it has a historical context, even a history that we don't read in the Bible, that was taking place, that helps us to understand if we study that. And then, of course, in the biblical history, what order of things, where did this take place? So what time are we dealing with? What is happening on the world stage? What's happening in the regional level? What's happening at that particular location of the story? What has happened at that location in the story? And we'll talk about that a little more today. Then, we mentioned the cultural context. And this is one that I'm quite positive every passage in the Bible we look at is in a different cultural context than what we live in. Okay? The Bible is written to people in, at least 2,000 years ago, some 3,000 years ago. The Hebrew, Babylon, that's a Oriental, if we're looking at it historically, Oriental context. Then the epistles are written to a Greek-Roman context, and that's totally different than what we understand in our American context. So looking at it culturally will help us understand a lot more of what's there. Not that we should, but really we're experiencing, and we don't even know it, culture shock every time we read the Bible, because it's so different than what the language is different, the food is different, clothing, music, literature, even the money. What you read something and there was mites and talents and all that. Is a talent bigger than a mite? I think we know that, hopefully. Talent is bigger than a mite, but we have these different ephahs and hins. We're going to see that, I think, in Exodus. Maybe it's Leviticus. The different measurements, all of that type of thing, social norms, values of society, religions, government, all of that. We talked about a couple major culture themes. There's the honor and shame theme to remember. Hellenism, that's more of a theme to remember in the New Testament. That's the tremendous Greek influence that was on the world then, and is actually still is so tremendous that we still have Greek influences in our lives today. Tribal society, and that is more of an Old Testament thing where there's a lot of close relationships, let's just put it that way, in tribes. The temple as the center of life in the Old and New Testament, the rabbinical world. So we talked about those types of things. And then, so that's the historical context and the cultural context. And so today, I think I can get through the other four. And the next one is the geographical context. So everything that happens in a place. Today, this class is happening in Chesterton, Indiana. So, but everything that happens in the Bible is in a certain place. So geography, we think first of all of the place on the map. Okay? Where did it happen? Was it in Jerusalem? Was it in Babylon? Where is Tarshish? We were reading about Tarshish in our devotions this morning. And there's a couple of Tarshish, but when Jonah ran off to Tarshish, that's in modern-day Spain. Okay, so, he was on a boat to Spain. Well, where's that in relation to where he was? Where's that in relation to Nineveh? So placement on the map. Topography. So topography is like the shape of the land. And that would include water and bodies of water and rivers and that type of thing. And this would be related to the idea of whenever they go to Jerusalem, they are almost always talking about going up to Jerusalem. If you look on a map, they're in Galilee, which is north of Jerusalem, but they're going up to Jerusalem. Well, they're not going north to Jerusalem, they're going up in elevation to Jerusalem. And that's not a real significant geographical fact, but that's just an illustration of topography, the shape of the land. The climate. What's it normally like? Hot, dry, arid, or something else? The land quality. This makes a tremendous difference, especially the further back we go, the less agricultural technology we have, the bigger difference the land quality is. I think even now land quality makes a big difference. There's a difference in farmland between Indiana and Iowa and other, the farm, it's worth different amounts because of the quality of the land. And that's just farmland. But it's just land quality, water rules the world. Water determines where you live. You must have water to live. And ancient cities had running water, but they could only have running water if they were built on or near springs and wells. So where that city is placed is because of water. And access to water makes a huge difference. In battles, if your well was outside your city walls, your enemies could poison your water, keep you away from your water. You're going to starve to death. You're going to thirst to death. That's why, remember Hezekiah, he covered up the well outside the wall and built a trench, basically. Dug through limestone, a trench so that the water came inside the walls. So water access, accessibility. How easy is it to get to this place that this event takes, where this event takes place? Is it up and down hills? Is it off the main road? Is it on the main road? Which brings me to the idea of roads and trade in the ancient world. I don't know if they taxed everything that came through their town, or if they just, as travelers were going from one spot to another, they had to stop and buy things from them. But cities that were on major trade routes were very well off. They were larger. People wanted to be there. There was more opportunities there, I guess. There's major trade routes from Egypt up into Europe and over into Asia, and they all come through Israel. There's about 2 or 3 main routes, and if you know these, you see why certain cities become more influential than others. You know why there's going to be a battle of Armageddon. The town, the city of Megiddo, overlooks the valley of Armageddon. And this is where everything, there's been 25 civilizations, I think, in that city, built up, torn down. So roads, trade, the politics, and that would mean who is ruling. Okay, can be in a lot of different places, but we'll just put it here at geography. Here's a city, a town. Who's ruling here at this point in time? And that changes. The Seleucids push the Ptolemies, and then the Ptolemies push the Seleucids, and that's in this intertestamental period. But you have the Assyrians. We read about Syria, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Egyptians, and we don't see all the time exactly in the Bible who's kind of governing these areas. I think, for instance, once Israel had been destroyed, I think it would be Israel had been captured, yes, and we have Judah as a kingdom. It's a weaker kingdom, and things are happening around them. The Assyrians are pushing it. When the Assyrians took over Israel, they didn't just leave and let the king of Judah control that. They controlled that. Egypt was pushing things around. Pharaoh Necho, and so he's pushing up, and so you have things happening around events in the Bible that we don't necessarily always see. We do know about Pharaoh Necho. Brother James Rose mentioned him in his testimony a little while back. Josiah went out and fought against him, and Pharaoh Necho was actually wanting to fight against some other people. What was happening? Egypt was pushing their boundaries up, or defending boundaries that had even enveloped Jerusalem, but he didn't want to deal with Jerusalem. He wasn't going to hurt them. They could keep doing what they wanted. So there's politics. Who's governing has an effect on our understanding of the event. So where are we on the map? What do we know about this location? Are we dealing with mountains or valleys, deserts? Is this an urban setting, a city setting, or a rural setting? Who lives there in where we're talking about? What are they like? We know a glimpse of this when I say it, but who lives in Nineveh? What are they like? Well, that's going to tell us a little bit of why Jonah didn't want to go there, right? So, and that's going to be, that right there is just Jonah and Nineveh. Every other place in the Bible has this type of a history. Sometimes you discover that it's what you thought. But other times you're going to read and say, whoa, okay, that adds to my understanding of Scripture. Who's the ruling authority? What is the flow of traffic like in the area? This reminds me of, I was thinking about this reminds me of the story of the woman at the well. The Bible says that Jesus must needs go through Samaria. If we look at the Bible, we just say, well, of course, he's going up to Galilee. He's just going to go straight up. He was in Jerusalem. He's just going to walk straight up there. That's how everybody would go. It's not how everybody would go, okay? Who ruled? Or, who lived there? What were they like? The Samaritans were in Samaria, and the Jews hated the Samaritans. We see that in the Bible, but okay, so, and even in the text, she says, why are you talking to me? She says, we worship in this mountain. She's at Jacob's well. I've seen Jacob's well, not ever been there. But I was on the mountain that she said we worship in, up on Mount Gerizim, and you can look down there, and there's the place where Jacob's well is. And there's a little valley, and right across there is Mount Ebal. Ebal and Gerizim, where the blessings and the curses were announced and amened. But anyway, so he must needs go through, and we've probably heard this preached on, there's a reason. That's significant. Geography. All right, so then kind of much related to geography, but in a separate category is the visual context. That would mean like, what was it like to be there? Not geography, I would say, is the macro, the big level. Where is it and who's there? But then this event took place. It took place on a street or in a house or something like that. A classic illustration of in a house is the four men that let their friend down through the roof. Okay, now, if we're thinking around us, we're like, whoa, how did they get up on that roof? Right? Who does roofs around here? I'm going to say this wrong. Was it a 12-1 pitch or a 12-12 pitch or a 6-12 pitch? Or I don't know all that. I know there's pitches and slopes on roofs. Well, no, it wasn't. So what was the shape of the house? Lazarus sat at the gate, and he would fain have eaten the crumbs from the table. It kind of gives us the impression that he could see the food being eaten and the crumbs dropping from the rich man's table. And he wished he could, if I could just have some of that food. But the rich man didn't care. Okay, there's some visual there. If we can not just imagine, we have to use our imagination here because there are not many houses that were in existence then that are still, complete living residences now. But there are remains that we can look at. We can see from the walls the shape of a house. We know from study how tall walls could be before they would put a roof on it or something like that. How they made the roofs. We know that the roofs were flat. It had Exodus tells us about having like a wall around so that nobody falls off of your roof. But so getting an idea of what it looked like in the event helps us understand better what happened. What did the place look like? Are there photos of ancient ruins and locations? And there are. There's a website called BiblePlaces.com that has hundreds, even thousands of pictures of places in the Bible lands. And we have bought their library, and we can use it in our ministry here. So as much as I think this is great in practice, I always forget to get these pictures and stuff like this. But it's out there. If you wanted to look for it, you could go there and look at the different pictures on their website and that type of thing. Are there photos of ancient ruins or of the location? Are there reputable artist illustrations of the story? So this visual is asking the question, what was it like to have been there in the event? If you could be a fly on the wall or a person in the corner watching what happened in this incident, what was it like could you be a fly on the wall when Jesus and the three disciples went with the mom and dad into the room where the girl had died? Everybody knew she was dead. They were weeping and wailing. What happened there? What was it like? What were rooms like there? It might not be a stunning revelation, but it would be helpful. So that's the visual context. Then there's what we'll call the linguistic context. Now that's a big word, but it's the idea of the language. And so when God gave the scriptures, he gave them in the Old Testament, they're given in the Hebrew language. And in the New Testament, they're given in the Greek language. God used those languages to give his word. God understands when we speak English. We don't have to learn Hebrew to be able to talk to God, but God didn't speak directly his word in English or Spanish or German or anything like that. The Bible was given in Hebrew and Greek. So the Old Testament is Hebrew and the New Testament is Greek. So there's always something that is lost or missing a little bit. Sometimes it's a tiny bit. Sometimes it's a greater amount when we translate from one language to another. Words are not exact. When we do a conversion, if we were going to convert currency, some currencies, it's exactly $2 per American dollar. Other currencies, it's some fraction, and so you're not going to get exactly the same conversion. Of course, with numbers, we can use fractions, and that's not a greatest illustration example. But the point is that our languages are different, and so when we're reading in English, there could be something more there or a little different than the way we understand that word. Also, just the difference between what words meant in 1611, what English words meant in 1611, and what they mean today. Affections. The word affections means a very, very, very different thing today than it did in 1611. If you want to understand a little bit, you could read Jonathan Edwards' works on the affections, and you see that he's dealing with, just read it, and by reading his context, you understand he's dealing with something way different than what we think of when we think of affections. And actually, his is more recent than 1611, but much closer to what the scriptures mean when it says that. Anyway, Hebrew is a language with broad cultural, contextual meanings. The Greek language is much more precise than the Hebrew language. We've said this before, but it's clearly not exact. This was an interesting thing that I learned thinking about this. There are approximately 8,000 Hebrew words in the Bible. Now, they use more than 8,000 words in conversation, but there's 8,000 Hebrew words in the Bible, approximately. We, today, now we wouldn't use all these words if we were writing the Bible, but we use 400,000 English words. So, what does that mean? That means that the Hebrew language, at least biblical Hebrew, didn't have many words to choose from, but it also means that each word is packed with meaning. There's a lot inside those words. So if I'm going to take this word that's packed with meaning and pick an English word that is quite precise and only means one or two things, I might need 4 or 5 words, or could choose between 4 or 5 or 6 English words to get a good understanding of what the Hebrew word is. And the way we understand that translation should take place is word for word. So a translator, our English translators, the King James Version, they are committed to just, if I see a Hebrew word, I'm going to put one English word there. Oh, and I have this many choices. Which one's the best? So translators are interpreting. The translators did interpret. They tried to figure out which is the best word here to match this, because it's not a one-to-one match. So English and every other language beside Hebrew and Greek is a translation, and there's interpretation taking place when they make those choices. That means there's other words that could have been used. A different word in a translation is not evil. It's probably helpful. That's why we get tools like Strong's Concordance. A Strong's Concordance also has like a dictionary and stuff in it. So we see the word, we look up a verse, we see the word that's there, and then the Strong was a theologian and very brilliant man. So he tells us all the other words, the meanings of this word in Hebrew, and that helps us to understand, because it might not, that one word, one English word isn't maybe the best, isn't the only word. I think that our King James translators did the best job that could be done, but they would tell you that it's a translation and there's other words possible, and you should study and look at them. So there's that thing. And just say that there's a lot that goes into the translation of Scripture. This is not textual class, but there's a lot that goes into it, and the King James translators had a tremendous system, checking themselves and all of this. So our translation of Scripture is stellar. It's the best that's available, beside the fact that it's about the only one that comes from the right text. But we should remember that we're dealing with a language that's not ours. What words in our text seem to be significant? That's a question to ask. So what words are significant? So, and if that's the case, this is a significant word, it's really influencing my understanding. I want to get a better understanding of what that word is. What are other possible translation of those words? And that's where we can use the Strong's Concordance and other tools to help us understand that. What does the word mean in its original language? And then, is the word communicating anything visual or a cultural value? So we have plays on words. Those didn't just develop in the last 50 years. So other languages and other cultures, they would have plays on words. It might be communicating something culturally or visual beside its dictionary definition of the word. And then where else is this word used in this particular book or in the Bible? So those are some things to remember looking at it as a language. And then there's the literary sense. So linguistic is the actual language. Literary sense would be, how are these words being used? The Bible is literature. It's more than just literature, but it is literature. There's the writing style there. There's how is it written? Some of it is written as a historical narrative. Some of it is written as poetry, Hebrew poetry. Some of it is written as law. Some of it is written as wisdom literature, which is a little, anyway, it's real short, succinct, and has a lot of punch to it, we might say. Some of it is written as prophecy or as preaching, parable, letters and epistles, apocalyptic, which is like telling the future. So we have to understand, what am I reading? A lot of you probably have heard or seen something and beside what are we reading? Well, what are we reading? What tools are being employed inside of that? I think of satire. A lot of you have probably seen headlines, news stories from the Babylon Bee. How many of you have seen somebody that took one of those stories seriously? They didn't understand what they were reading. It's satire, it's got a point, but they just like blew their top and like commenting like crazy, and you're supposed to laugh, and get the point. But they thought, this is real. Well, that can happen in the Bible too. Paul uses satire some. He tells the Corinthians that he is dumb and they are the wisest people in the world. Is that the way I'm translating there? But that's not what he means there, is it? We should understand that. We have to understand what we're reading, the major genre that we're reading, and the tools that are being used inside that. What are the major themes of the book? What is the flow of, what is the writing that has a certain plot line, I guess we would say if it was a story, the flow from the beginning to the end, the purpose of the writing. A lot of questions we should ask. Who wrote the book? Where was he when he wrote it? What were his circumstances? To whom was it written? Where do they live? What relationship is there between the writer and the recipients? When was the book composed? When was it written? When was it written about? So Chronicles is written much later than when it's written about. There's a different view of the kingdoms of Judah in Chronicles as there is in the Kings. That's important to understand. There's something else happening there besides just telling the story again the second time. Why was the book written? So then there's the placement. Where does the story or teaching live inside the book or reside? Where is it in the book? Its immediate location, its overall location. Where is it in the author's other writings? If he wrote more than one thing, like Paul and Moses and John in particular, when did they write this? How does it fit with things? What had they written before this? What had they not written yet? Where does it fit in the larger biblical narrative? So the Bible, in the end, is really one story. It's God's story. He's revealing something to mankind. So how does this fit into that big overall narrative of what God is telling us in the Bible? And that's one of the biggest stories he's telling is redemption. Creation, fall, and the redemption. The redemption of mankind. So how does this fit into that? So questions to make sure that we are, to help us get a right literary view of something that we're reading or studying is, what type of writing is this? What is its design? All of those who, where, to whom, questions. And then is there parallel stories? Is there another account of this story? Is there another time when something like this happened? God didn't accidentally let two things happen and let us see about them. He would want us to think about them. What did he do? What happened here? Actual parallel stories or echoes, something that happened similar. So I know I hurried through these things, but we should do more than just read the words and then put it down. We should really be trying to understand Scriptures, and these are 6 different ways that we can look at Scriptures to help us even better understand what is being taught to us, told to us by God in the Scriptures. Let's pray.